Joining us now to review some headlines of top news around the world. Arise News analyst Emmanuel Ofeni, the great Malabite, is here. Great to have you, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning.
We'll start the review with this day, Nigeria's newspaper of record. We'll start with the lead story. ICC seeks arrest of Israel's leader, Netanyahu, defense minister for war crimes. Prime Minister, accusations, a disgrace, attack on our military and all of Israel. Biden, it's outrageous. U.S. lawmakers kick. Several Hamas leaders also risk arrest. While the chief prosecutor yesterday is making a case for the arrests of Israeli Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, where you say the world cannot just sit and watch genocidal act real time as is happening in Gaza. Condemnable as the October 7 attack by Hamas on Israel's territory, killing many and taking hundreds hostage. Condemnable. But what has followed is disproportionate and a clear case of an attempt to eliminate the people of Palestine, because the Israelis said it themselves. The leaders at the start of this war on Gaza talked as if the Palestinians were no longer human beings. They talked of using blockade, stopping food, medicine, water coming into Gaza, bombing desalination plants that give the people clean water. And it was clearly a case of scorched earth policy, because they did not only bomb, they went with bulldozers and they were literally excavating roads. The destruction is what people watch every day, real time. So for whatever it is worth, this move by the ICC prosecutor, well, if nothing else, at least it will be on record that the world did not watch idly while this genocidal war was going on. It will be said in future, well, with the U.S. backing, perhaps nothing changes the position of Israel, disregard for international law, and they go on and on. But with this warrant being sought by the chief prosecutor, we hope the Israeli leaders, even as they go on the high horse and talk down on the world community, they should also do a rethink and perhaps know when to pull the brake and allow negotiation, truce to come into play, and ultimately, as most rational persons in the international community are saying, the Palestinian question has to be answered with a two-state solution, where both countries will live side by side, Israel and Palestine, in peace and the progress. But the right-wing Israeli leadership believe that a perpetual war is the way to peace. I don't think that makes sense, because right now, the people of Israel are not enjoying what is happening, because many are not in their homes. On all fronts, from, of course, their border with Lebanon, where Hezbollah is also engaging the Israeli military. But this should be a lesson. And it is quite notable that the European countries who are signatories to the ICC, they have not condemned this. Rather, they are subtly pointing out that Israel should heed the warning, the advisory, that they should tarry for a while and let a truce take place, the hostages, Israeli hostages, so that they can come out alive. But the Israeli Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, although there seem to be some parting of ways on the end game of all this. Now, if we just look at other newspapers, of course, Still on the front page of This Day, Iran gets new leader. Tinubu mourns Raisi, yes, as the burial of Ibrahim Raisi, the Iranian prime minister who died in that helicopter crash. His burial starts today. Well, the country has moved on quickly to appoint another leader in line with the constitution, but in 50 days, there has to be a new election in Iran to elect a new president. Now let's look at other newspapers. The Guardian newspaper. Federal government in dilemma as inflation spikes. Meal budget to 540 billion naira. Talking about school feeding of 10 million kids. Well, the children must continue to eat. But inflation, of course, affecting everything in the country. Now, also on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, Labour threatens strike, issues May 31, ultimatum for new minimum wage deal. Well, Labour is returning to the negotiation table today. An indication that at least the 100,000 naira proposed by the federal government, has moved the needle from point A to point B, unlike the paltry 48,000 initially mentioned, which made Labour to pull out of talks. 615,000 naira at the other extreme from Labour, but the essence of negotiation is that people at the negotiating table will have to come to a compromise. And I'm sure, despite the argument for 615,000 and the realism of the situation in the country, Labour will definitely not sit on the position of 615,000 naira. Otherwise, that will not be negotiation. But the fact that they are returning to the negotiation table today tells you that, well, they are also ready to shift grounds. And in fact, there was a report to that effect yesterday that both Labour and the federal government are ready to shift ground for a new minimum wage to be agreed. After all, a new minimum wage will not be final because after 5 years down the line, there has to be another negotiation for a new minimum wage. So if you don't get everything now, well, you just take what you can get, but it has to be reasonable. I agree with Labour leaders that whatever they get at the end of the day should be at least something that can help the average worker. I don't want to say carry them through the month. Well, nobody buy a bag of rice every month. So using the price of a bag of rice. How many people even buy a bag of rice, even when it was very cheap?
And for me, the problem I have with Labour, Mr. Feni, is the quality of arguments.
Well,
we are running an intellectual station. The quality of argument is a problem I have with Labour. Make your good argument. Don't tell me bag of rice.
Rufai, hold on. Labour, the labourer deserves his wage. Right?
Certain.
And nothing, for a worker, nothing can be too much. But we're talking realism. And it has to be negotiated.
Yeah.
So Labour has given its position, government gave a position, and now there's a coming together. And at the end of the day, we have a position. I'm sure Labour will smile, though they will not get everything they want, and nobody buys a bag of rice every month.
How much is a bag of rice?
Now let's look at other stories, other newspapers. The Punch newspaper, student loan, 1.2 million beneficiaries listed as scheme begins Friday. Students in 222 tertiary institutions to benefit. Admission letter, NIN, BVN needed. But the other aspect, the saying, is only students in federal universities. I think that does not, because so many indigent students in state-owned university. If you say private university, if you can pay for private university, then it means you don't need a loan. That you can consider that. But to say state universities, students in state university will not be part of this, then I don't think that is okay. And that they have to take a quick look at that so that students in public universities, state-owned, federal-owned universities can be part of this scheme. They say, well, begins on Friday. Students who need it have been looking forward to this commencement date. Now, the Nation newspaper, federal government releases conditions as student loan scheme begins. The same story. Vanguard newspaper, POS, point of sales. Anger, frustration over high cost of cash withdrawals as operators gradually take over banks' ATM function. Customers relate sad experiences in states. Banks sell cash to us. Delta POS operators. There's a problem in the system. You can walk down Awolowo Road and you count the number of automated teller machines that are dispensing. Many don't. The banks, they cannot tell their customers what is happening. And now the POS, of course, taking over the function, and they charge exorbitant costs, which many indigent users are finding unbearable. CBN, the banks, they have to address this. Because if you own a bank account, you go to your bank ATM and you cannot get cash for a whole day. I tried one bank from morning till I left Ikoyi yesterday at about 3 p.m. No cash. 1, 2, 3, several. Now, the Nigerian Tribune newspaper, minimum wage NLC say no going back on May 31. While the New Telegraph newspaper, poor remuneration, Nigerians suffering consequences of deprived judiciary, Chief Justice of Nigeria. Well, I don't want to believe, because according to the argument put forward by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, if you pay judges well, they will not be lured with bribes and all that. But I think we know that judges must be like Caesar's wife. Yeah. They must live above board, whether they receive huge remuneration or not. There can be no excuse for doing otherwise. When they dispense justice, those in the temple of justice must live above board. So I don't buy that argument. But I agree that judges should be well paid. And just like any other worker, they should be well paid. Now, if we look at the Daily Trust newspaper, bandits in military uniform abduct 20 in Abuja. 2 attackers captured police. Estates buy pump action, other weapons for vigilantes. We have been tasked to fix police vehicles, residents, the state of security in the country. Well, if we cannot fund the police as they are now, even when we talk about state police, we need to fund the police properly, recruit more men, even as we talk about multi-level policing, aka state police, this time around. Now, the foreign newspapers quickly across Africa, the Citizens newspaper, what next for Zuma? Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa, has been barred. He cannot stand for election come the next general election. But what next for him? He's still likely to have influence on the polls. And the Business Day newspaper of South Africa saying Zuma off list, but will be on ballot. Yes, of course, the Independent Electoral Commission able to press ahead with final arrangement after top court ruling. Yes, now they know that Jacob Zuma will not be on the ballot. If we just look at one other newspaper, the Herald of Zimbabwe, let's sharpen long-term strategies against droughts. Of course, yesterday, the leaders of Southern Africa Development Council met in Harare how to raise funds and food for suffering people as a result of the El Nino rain. Okay. But they're talking about long-term strategy.
So I hear we have to go. So a couple of things I must have to say, and going back to the labor matter, it has to be said, there's something called a coherence of argument, not the sentiments and the emotions of an argument. Coherently, as we speak today, it is not realistic to pay 615,000. One of the reasons we have inflation is because of money in circulation that rose to about billions and trillions, if possible. Truth has to be said. You pay 615,000 for a government that doesn't even make the revenue. that's also going to increase inflation.
But there's also profligacy at government level.
We sanction
Federal,
that.
states.
No. Every time
this local government.
we talk about the profligacy and we bash the politicians, but let's also say what is realistic and what is realistic. At this point, government has put forward 100,000. I think Labour should now be thinking of a meet me halfway number. It can't be that 615K.
100,000 still small.
Yeah,
why?
Small.
Because 30,000 when it was agreed, that was the equivalent of $8.
Yeah.
Times that by the exchange that now,
less.
you will get is less.
All of this conversation,
right?
Labour has not given us a number. They've still been insisting on the 615,000 from day one.
At the negotiation table, they will put a number.
So that's what they should do. So the earlier you put forward a number, the better it is for all of us, so that we can clear all of this. Because I really want them to pass that minimum wage, so that we know where we are going. So that the next focus now will be people like governors that they mentioned in Anambra State are not paying, so that we can put the torchlight on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacob Zuma, we'll see what's next for him, but what they're now positioning is that whoever emerges as a candidate of the party he's anointed by Jacob Zuma, so still using that as a ploy. But a bigger question for me, Mr. Feni, is his popularity. Despite his controversial antecedents and the fact that he's been convicted, for not showing up in the corruption courts, still has a massive support base.
In his homeland.
In his homeland. I mean, for many reasons, I mean, he was an anti-apartheid fighter, but you then begin to think of, when we say that the people deserve the leader that they have. So when you hear of leaders who are looting, stealing, even though there are allegations, he hasn't subjected himself, but he did serve time. You then wonder why people still want him back. Is it that he's the best candidate, or the fact that we just love sometimes our oppressors, the people who oppress us on the African continent? We need to deal with that. Maybe more education,
it's not only
more awareness.
Trump say have a huge following.
Everywhere, it's true.
If you have a cult following, you have a cult following.